Loud. Hey, everybody, this is Jason Zymet from Unoriginal Vinyl. Joining me is my co-host,
Tim.
Tim's also with Unoriginal Vinyl. Today, we're talking with Stavesacre about earliest memories, formation of the band, and this is all supplemental bonus material and content, mixed media, as we like to call it, for the Stavesacre Friction vinyl release, as well as the Stavesacre Absolutes vinyl release. So we hope you enjoy this conversation. I'm going to introduce all of these other members by letting them introduce themselves. So Dirk, starting with you.
Hey, I'm Dirk. I play bass in Stavesacre.
Hi, I think it's my turn. I'm Jeff. I play guitar in Stavesacre.
I'm Mark, and I hang around the band called Stavesacre. I think so.
For the fans out there, Stavesacre is born in around 94, 95 out of the dissolution of several other well-known scene bands in Southern California. Why don't y'all talk about what bands maybe you were in before Stavesacre and how you all came together? It seems like you all basically were bedfellows to begin with since the 80s, but maybe how y'all met and know each other, and more importantly, why you decided to start a band with an impossible to pronounce name.
If you want to start or you want me to start?
Go for it, Dirk.
Well, I was in a band called Focused, and I think looking at some of the memorabilia, I think we formed around 95. It's safe to say that Stavesacre got active in 1995. And if I remember correctly, Jeff had proposed the idea of doing something different than the bands we were currently in or had been in. And he was going to ask Mark to sing, which to me, being a fan of the Crucified and all things Jeff and Mark, seemed absurd to me at the time that was even possible. And so me and Jeff just talked about doing something that was more post-hardcore-y, more melodic, more akin to some of the bands that we would have been listening to in 94, 95. And that is my recollection, is that it was just kind of born of a conversation you and I had about doing something different. But I think I'm probably combining a lot of conversations.
I'm sure it was. I mean, Mark, you'd probably be better at like exactly when the Crucified ended. Was that 92, 93 maybe? And
yeah, it was 93.
Yeah. And so we all went our separate ways, but I moved back home to Southern California. Dirk lived in Southern California. Mark, I think, actually was down in Southern California before I moved back there. So we all stayed in touch. There was never any bad blood, or if there was, it was easily squashed over like one trip to Taco Bell and just hanging out and talking about, hey, I was stupid. Hey, me too. Cool. Anyway, what are you doing? But yeah, then we just started talking about doing stuff together because Mark and I hadn't done music for a little while. Dirk was still active and focused. And Dirk and I actually were you living with my family at that time when we started everything, or had you already moved out?
No,
Probably had already moved out, but yeah, no. Yeah. So
I think it's hard for people to wrap their heads around the notion that when you're starting a band in 94 in this tooth and nail Southern California hardcore adjacent scene, there's no notion of how big the scene could potentially become. So probably when you're starting your band, the psychology has more to do with wanting to hang out with your friends than it is touring the world. Maybe you might think in your head, I can get as far as Cornerstone to play or something, but
Right.
What's sort of the ambition behind Stavesacre when you start? Is it just kind of that hang out with your friends vibe, or are you guys thinking about like, we want to become something pretty big?
I think probably a combination of a lot of things. We definitely wanted to hang out with each other. there was no bad blood between us. I mean,
No.
it was weird because, you know, Crucified ended in such like a kind of
Mouse fart.
a whimper as opposed to a bang, and it was just a pretty tough time for me, and I'm sure for some of the other guys as well. Crucified just had there were a lot of things that happened there that you know, people would never really guess probably. And then you know how it is, you're in your early 20s, you're just kind of running around. You have no real, I mean, most of us didn't go to school. Dirk did, but you know, did you graduate, Dirk?
No.
I mean, you know, it was just like I was lost. I was
Yeah.
pretty messed up in the head at the time, or I had come out of that, you know, in 93. And like 93 was real super dark after, even before Crucified broke up, and then it did break up, and things got substantially worse. And I honestly can remember just thinking, I don't know what the point of any of this is, you know. It's pretty dark. And then I attribute good friends, of course, but I mean, I still believe, man. I know people are pretty sure that I don't, but I still believe in God, and I still believe in Jesus, and I still believe he loves me and cares for me. I don't really understand how that works or why or any of those things, but I don't need to. I just was in a really bad place that I probably wasn't going to make it out of. And then my friend Renee, Piece 586, came and picked me up and took me to a coffee shop, and I saw Tim Mann from Focused and Dirk and all those guys, and through multiple steps ended up living down there in the Newman house with all these other people. And it was sort of like a reintroduction to all of these old friends that I had that I didn't think even really cared. You know, when I'm from Fresno originally, so Southern California is like a mystical land back then. You know, if it's worth it to know, not that nobody had any idea how big Tooth and Nail would get, you got to go even further back and realize that the world was way bigger then. You know, you couldn't just reach out and pull your cell phone out, you know. You have to track people down. Anyway, I remember Baloo and Dirk coming over to my house after I had moved out of the Newman house and was kind of getting my feet underneath me. I actually had a job and didn't want to kill myself every day, things like that, you know.
Baby steps.
Baby steps. Baloo and Dirk came over to my this house I was living at with Aaron Bradford, and who was in the band. I think Aaron was in Blamed, wasn't he? Was he in the Blamed? I think he was, at least at the beginning. Anyway,
Sure.
Aaron, he came over to my place and they were just like, hey, we want to start a band. Do you want to be in it? And they handed me a stack of discs. I remember that. And said, but we don't want to do any of that other shit. We want to do something else, you know? And I honestly I feel like a lot of people were like wondering what was going to be the next kind of form of music, you know. Grunge had kind of done its thing. I remember when we first talked, Melancholy had just come out, and like everyone was obsessed with that record. And but you know, it wasn't really something to aspire to, and it didn't really satisfy that kind of combination of all the different styles that all of us enjoyed. I mean, I was thinking about this. I don't know about Jeremy at the time, but I know Baloo, myself, and Dirk, all three of us at various points worked in record stores, and you just have a completely different appreciation for styles of music after you work in a record shop, you know. And there was definitely a blend that could be formulated. And I remember that stack included Quicksand's Slip album. I think there was a Burn CD in there, maybe. But it was just like all the stuff that wasn't punk rock. It wasn't metal. It wasn't rap rock or whatever. It was like dynamic, dramatic post-hardcore, which is what people ended up calling it. And they said, we want to do something more in kind of in this vein. And I had never sung really. I'd never felt like I was a singer. I was just like shouting and crucified all the time. And this gave me the opportunity to do that, but also to, you know, do it in a way that I was comfortable with. So I think that was kind of, does that sound right to you guys?
Yeah. When you heard Quicksand and those type of bands, did it hit you right away? This is what I want to do.
Oh yeah. And I wasn't as familiar with them as Baloo and Dirk were. You know, I was still sort of, you know, I can't remember if it was before or after that conversation. It had to be after that conversation that we went and saw that first Warped Tour, and Quicksand was there, and
L7
Deftones,
probably.
L7,
Yeah, L7,
Deftones.
big influence on us. L7.
You
Yeah.
can hear it. I mean, the riffiness of it. Honestly, it's not the singing, but the
And
guitar.
Orange
the-
work.
9 millimeter.
and the hatred of men.
Yeah,
Orange 9 millimeter.
general.
Yes.
that's right.
You men.
Did you say Deftones?
Oh,
Deftones
yeah.
and Orange 9 millimeter were both at that first tour. And I remember, you know, we had come from like the Crucified thing, and there's a bunch of bands that we had played with, and one of the guys from a band called Hold True, I think. Is that right? Big giant bald singer guy. He was like, you got to come see this band. They're incredible. And he hands us this little 3-song demo, and we were like, what is it? You know, and you got to keep in mind, like, No Doubt had not blown up at this point. They were still just like this floundering kind of ska weird band. They were playing it, and everyone was like, hey, let's go watch this band that nobody likes. But they're Orange County legends, you know what I mean? And they were huge when they would go to other towns, or they would play in Southern California, but they'd go to other towns, and just, it wasn't a thing. Anyway, it was like a lot of that. And I remember going, and this guy tells us about this band Deftones, and I was like, dude, I got one ska band limit. I'll go see a ska band, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to see another ska band. He's like,
I thought the
ska.
same
Like,
thing.
Yeah.
bullshit, dude. Don't try and
The
trick
tones
me.
at the tones
This
at the end
band
of the name,
has
we all thought they
tones.
were a ska band.
Picture guys on stage with checkerboard ties. I'm not going to that. And then, of course,
because
obviously they were
Sublime
nothing
was
like
huge too in SoCal. Sublime and No Doubt were the two bands popping at that time.
And
honestly.
I full on hated Sublime and 311 and all that kind of like weird fake reggae music, you know.
Yeah.
It was like a weird time. But, you know, you could still like have strong opinions about stuff, and nobody wanted to like tear your name down, you know, in the press or anything.
More importantly, they're all playing shows together. You're going to see Judge or
man.
Shades Apart with Sublime, and it was no thing. Like, you didn't care.
Correct.
Yeah. The Warped Tour
Yeah,
was
the bills
awesome.
were
There's all
always
these
messed
different
up.
bands. Nobody really seemed to care. And that was, of course, a residual of the Lollapalooza thing, you know. That was like a really big deal. So I don't know. It was awesome. Like, I remember that stack of CDs. The one of the albums that was in there was Driver Not Included. And if it wasn't in that original stack, it was later. And that was a big deal because A, we loved Driver Not Included, but B, a guy that Jeff and I had been introduced to. Although, did you ever talk to Brian before Stavesacre, Baloo?
Who? Karlstrom?
Yeah, I
No.
don't know that you did.
Mm-mm.
Like, you gotta, this is something that's kind of cool. When Baloo and I were roommates in the Crucified back in like 1991, and whenever Dirk came out, we saw this, you know, CD, look at the back of, no one had ever heard a band like that before. There was no music like that at all. And it was really full and rich sounding and had like great tones and stuff. And I remember seeing the name down at the bottom, and I was like, Brian, you know, obviously Dave Jordan. And then, but you don't even think at that time, hey, maybe we'll get Dave Jordan to do our record. You think, who's some of the other guys on here that we can afford, you know? And there was that Brian Karlstrom name, and our old record label had introduced me to him. And when we got Driver Not Included, there they were again. And we're like, dude, they know. And so when I called Brian, I'm probably getting ahead of myself, but, you know, once we had recorded the 3-song demo, Brian said, yeah, I'll come down and listen. And, later on, he told me if that 3-song demo sounded anything like the Crucified, I was probably going to say no, because it's just not what I want to do right now,
That's
So I
cool.
felt like that conversation with the guys, it was like definitely a feeling that a lot of people had. There was like a new form of music that people were digging into. So
yeah. Dirk, when you and Blue are talking and you see Mark is in this sort of dire straits coming out of 94, and you're thinking about looking at a singer and you're thinking about knowing what he's got, which is this like dynamic beacon of a personality as a frontman, are you thinking to yourself like, this is a rescue mission to get Mark in with a bunch of healthier, happier guys? Or is this, I need this guy's raw power and energy to make our sound full and complete? What is your thought?
Mark shortened the time frame a little bit, because you're in Newman already 93, 94.
Mhm.
I'm coming down and staying there on the weekends from college. And at some point, that switch where you move and Jeremy takes your room happens.
Oh, yeah.
How everything kind of connects. So I think by the time the Stavesacre conversation is really happening, I think maybe the worst of what you're remembering is kind of a difficult time for you has kind of already passed.
Yeah.
So to me, it's all hopeful at that point. Like, holy crap, am I going to be in a band with Mark? Because Jeff is my connection to Mark. And I've known Jeff since I was 10. You know what I mean? So I didn't see it as a rescue mission. It seemed all hopeful and like, oh, we're all going to play music again together. This is crazy. And we're also skipping our punk rock practice.
I was hoping
That's
to
right.
leave that out, but go ahead.
Is now.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, how was that first like get together to play music? Was there an urge to play what you were used to, or did you venture
Well,
out?
okay, I'll take that one, Dirk, because you're reminding me now. Like I was definitely out of the tunnel. There's still a lot of things to sort out, of course, but now I have everything figured out, and I'm great.
Well done.
No problems at all.
Good job.
Congrats, brother.
But when that was going on, and I was moving out of Newman, I did start a band with Kevin Cribbs, my old buddy, and he wanted to start a new band. And so, these guys came and talked, and we jammed one night, and it was just like not what the guys wanted to do, And so eventually Kevin and I just had a conversation and said, listen, we're going to have to do this some other way. And that later became Outer Circle, much later.
Yeah, I think the thing is when we got together, we all thought that is what we wanted to do. Like me and Dirk and even Jeremy, we're going to get together and do this kind of hardcore punk rock thing. Mark will be the best singer for that because we know he can do that. But it was the drive home from that where I talked to Dirk. I'm like, that was fun, but I can't really see that going anywhere. It just wasn't a thing. And I was like, and then I flipped it and I was like, instead of trying to like kind of, this sounds reductive, but instead of trying to dumb down what we know we can do and play like 3-chord punk rock or whatever, what if we went the other way and like challenged ourselves to write music like maybe even beyond our capabilities, like push ourselves to write stuff way outside our comfort zones. And that's when we kind of really sat down and had that talk. And unfortunately, the very next practice is when I brought a bunch of the riffs that would be Stavesacre songs, and Kevin just looked at me like I was speaking Latin, and he was just like, "Yeah, this is not what I'm about." And so I mean, love the dude to death, dude, and I love that Outer Circle record. I'm glad it got made, but it's just not what we were trying to do. And he was gracious enough to just move aside instead of struggle along, because he could have stayed in it and probably caused us to either not get where we wanted to go or to make it take a lot longer. But when it just got down to the four of us in that room, man, the brakes just came off. We didn't become the killing machine I wanted to, but we definitely wrote some cool songs.
How soon between your first, let's call it a Stavesacre practice without Kevin, and you're in the studio demoing, and you guys are starting to, get that first flyer out there, Dirk, and show us in your camera that first flyer show that you guys had there in Brea, something like that. You know what I'm saying? What's the timeline on that? How quickly does that escalate?
Pretty quick, right?
Probably 6 months till we're doing the demo. So it's probably early 95 that we're really rehearsing and writing. And I just looked up, that invoice for the demo was June of 95. And so we would have gone to Cornerstone in a month after that, selling the demo. And then this show, I think, is our first. That's showing up.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I can't see the date real well, but it's the Blame Sometime Sunday, Black Eyed Shiva. And
July 15th. So that would have been like a week after Cornerstone.
of 95.
95.
Yep.
So that this show we played, if you want to call it played, a show at Cornerstone. And then this would have been our first proper show, and I'm sure we just played the 3 songs, maybe 4 songs.
So you've got what in your back pocket to hand people at Cornerstone to get them interested? Show us some goods there, some wares or some whatever you guys have as a press kit. That thing.
Yeah, look at that thing.
Right.
Demo.
That's Trainwreck at the moment and Suffocate Me, the first Stavesacre demo tape ever.
Correct. So for $3, you got the flyer, that page, and a sticker. We printed up like got the 8x10 sticker sheets and made, I don't know, it was probably 5 or 6 stickers, and I ruined a paper cutter cutting them all because they gummed it up. But yeah, we just took
Where does the parenthetical come from in the logo at that moment? Whose idea is that?
I think that was me.
Okay.
The parenthetical on the lowercase was Baloo, but I remember, Dirk, when you made that thing, you printed it out, crumpled it up, scratched it on the ground, and then copied it, and that was the logo done.
Yeah, we tried. There was like a few takes. It was like, let's try this one, crumble. That one got too messy. Like we were picky in our chaos.
So you're distressing it like a pair of designer jeans. I got it.
That was how you did flyer art back then. It was all ripping, like this is
Show the gap where their logo is, the Stavesacre logo. You can see it's actually just taped on right there.
Yeah.
Oh, that's like the OG one.
Well, he has the tape. The best part. Do you
Yeah.
remember, Dirk? Do you remember where the picture of the little girl came from?
It's a calendar.
It's a calendar that my mom had in her kitchen.
Like a Good Housekeeping or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's amazing.
She just had this and then we turned it into this total oh, aren't we so artsy and emo?
Oh, wow.
Yep.
That's so cool. Okay, so you guys hand a flyer, you hand a sticker, and you hand a $3 for $3. You get all this.
$3. Yep.
And then who is playing where you guys get, Jeremy tells you can hop on stage right now with our bad equipment and our drop C flat tuning guitars and all that. What's that about?
Mark, do you remember who it was that we jumped on?
Was it
Largo Park.
Overcome?
No. You talking about that Cornerstone?
Yeah.
So look, that's
Cornerstone was we were gonna jump up and do an opener for Argyle Park.
Yeah, but there was a band that played before them when we used their equipment. And I want to say it was someone like Overcome or Strong, someone who was like a dropped down heavy hardcore band. Because when we grabbed their stuff, all of a sudden I realized, this isn't tuned anywhere near where we play. Mark's going to be trying to find the key. It's going to be, it was a total disaster, but we just did our best and got done.
I would have had my Focus played.
Oh yeah,
that's true.
And Jeremy had his drums there because Jeremy had his drums there, right?
Probably. And I was probably borrowing your bass, Dirk, to play with the Crucified because I didn't have any of that stuff anymore.
Probably.
So Crucified plays 95 Cornerstone?
Yeah.
So
that was our first reunion before the ones in 2009 and stuff. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Back then you could reunite after 2 years and people
18
were excited.
months. Yeah. We've been gone for so long. I don't know. Yeah, I feel like that's every band now. They all break up, and 18 months later, they're surprised we're reuniting.
Right. I think it's important to note that when we showed up, we had literally like driven like from Chicago out to the middle of Illinois, crammed in the back of this van. And I remember, I mean, anyone who was at the old school Cornerstone remembers it was just disgusting. And I jumped out of the back of this minivan that I was riding in, and I had flip-flops on, and skadoosh, they were gone forever, never to be seen again. And I played the set in my bare feet, and it hurt so bad. It was terrible. And everybody, plywood. There's a special pain that comes when you step with your full body weight on a guitar cord, you know.
It's one step below Lego.
Yeah.
It was also important to remember that we had never really, we weren't comfortable playing live, playing this kind of music live yet. So it was just like, I don't know, just go. And the 3 songs on there, the fastest one that people might kind of gravitate towards because of their Crucified affections was Trainwreck. And that's like where the kick and snare are reversed from the usual Crucified stuff, you know. And until we played that, though, shit was touch and go, man. It was
we were getting
there was
stared at
chance
pretty
of
hard.
the Crucified, and people were ready to start tearing things apart, you know. That song sort of saved our tails there.
Jeff, how did you say you started your first show ever? What was the expression you used?
I don't even remember already. Oh, I know that we sucked, or don't know.
You said we started with the thud or something like that. I don't remember how you said it.
Yeah, it was, I wanted to, like, again, Mark and Dirk know I said this many times, that I didn't want to play shows just because we could. I wanted to become this like finely honed killing machine. I use that phrase all the time. I said, I want to have like a full set. I want to do all this stuff. And then Jeremy comes running up out of nowhere. Dude, these guys will let us play. And we just kind of thumped up on stage and, oh, here you go. Bye. It was like the most underwhelming beginning to a band ever.
As most great side projects always start that way, right?
Right.
Was that what you were viewing it at that point? Or were you saying, hey, this is our announcement, we are a band, we're here to make an impression? Or were you treated as a side project for all these other bands that knew you as?
No, because the Crucified had been done for a while and there was no chance of that coming back. Dirk, I mean, technically was still in Focused when we started, right, Dirk?
We were on the proper summer.
Yeah.
Summer tour. That's why we were there at Cornerstone.
Right.
If I remember correctly, because we all landed there for other reasons, it seems stupid to not take advantage of playing.
Right.
That opportunity. Like if I remember the logic, it's like, okay, we've got the demos. We were definitely gonna sell demos. And I think it was something that we were all excited about, but we hadn't thought about what the show was gonna be at all.
Right.
It only played in rehearsal. And then 4 p.m. in the afternoon in one of those festivals with crappy borrowed gear and just kind of whimpering. But Focus last show was actually January or February of '96.
Okay.
So,
right.
Well, everybody in Focus already wanted to do different things in '95. So, I mean, the writing was on the wall for me.
Yep.
I knew I would much rather be in Stavesacre at that point, even though Focus would exist for another 6 months or so after that.
I just talked to Tim yesterday, in fact, about Focused, and part of his comments to me about the label at the time was, I wish that Tooth and Nail had spent more energy, focus, marketing money, effort against the 10 bands they had in the label at the time. But Brandon's attitude at that time was like diversification or die, and get as many bands on the label as quickly as possible and do as many different types of music genres that I could potentially sell to distributors. So with that in mind, Stavesacre have somewhat of a backstage pass or something of a backdoor inroad to putting out a full length on Tooth and Nail? I know Tim worked at Brandon's apartment at the label and everything like that, but what point does the cassette get into the hands of Tooth and Nail, and then you guys very seriously entertain going with this rookie kid who's putting out like a prolific amount of releases in 95, given the bandwidth he had?
I mean, you got to remember though that Stavesacre was the 50th release on Tooth and Nail.
Yeah, it's prolific.
So it's
how
not
many
like,
he's putting out.
Yeah, he wasn't like an unknown quantity that, or even unproven. Now he hadn't blown up to, some of the numbers he was going to do later, but like
that's in 2 years. That's crazy for like a 23-year-old kid to put out 50 albums in 2 years.
But I think we had a mindset of like, maybe we shouldn't even go that route. It would be too easy, but Brandon's our friend and he's a really good talker. And he just was like, I'll give you whatever you want. Come and do a record for me. And we were ready to do a record when he was ready to do a record. I honestly think it was just that, he was ready when we were ready.
He was probably the only person on earth at that moment who you could say, we want Alice in Chains producer to do our first record. And he'd say, no problem. Okay.
Yeah, probably.
Sort of. I mean, Brian, basically, we brought Brian to the table and said, hey, can you make this happen? And he did our record for like dollars per hour kind of deal. It wasn't, because he was still trying to find his place or whatever as a producer in his own right. But he also was just, a buddy, and we knew that he would get the sound. And I think Brandon was a driving force in that too. And that it was less about like whether he could afford it, or I'm more like, this is what it's supposed to sound like. We're going to get him. Because when the record came out, he was freaking out, man. He the first couple songs that got mixed, he was at the studio, and he ran out to the car and put him in the car and played it, and he was like, this sounds like a general market record. I remember those words coming out of his mouth, which is such a record label owner thing to say,
So you guys go into the studio with Brian, and how long are you there for? How long does that process to record Friction take?
10 days, I think, maybe.
I
to record it.
We had to take a break for Christmas. I remember that. So we went longer than we should have, which is pretty much typical of every Stavesacre record. We were probably one of the only bands that could get away with that with Brandon. I know Dirk, we had however many days to do that Focused record that I produced, and that's how many days we got it done in. When I did the Chatterbox record for Brandon, that's how many days I had, and I got it done. But when it came to Stavesacre, I was like, hey, we need more time. What was he going to do? Like, it's the sunk cost fallacy at that point. You can't throw the record away. So give us more money so we can have more time.
Right.
It was
recording December.
What's that?
Maybe.
Is that how you remember it?
I don't remember, man.
That would make sense.
The only reason I know we had to take that break is because, and this is like kind of one of those stories, but we had that whole meltdown over Burning Clean, where the original version of Burning Clean did not go over well with one particular asshole member of the band. And
it was also not good.
But
the singing was
we had the meltdown. You went home over break and came back, and I remember sitting next to Brian going, oh man, I hope he fixed this train wreck of a song, no pun intended. And you went in there and saying what we now know of as Burning Clean for the first time hearing it. And I sat there in the control room just going, oh my God. Like, there's a difference between fixing a song that wasn't quite working and turning a travesty into something absolutely gorgeous and beautiful. It's like, wow. So yeah, there was that break over the Christmas kind of thing. But yeah, it was probably a total, I don't know, we could probably dig it out somewhere. It's probably a total of 14 days in the studio from beginning to end, not including the break.
Yeah.
That sounds right anyway.
Do you guys remember the first time you heard the final mix? Like how that made you feel?
Oh yeah. I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Because even it sounds like it came out yesterday to me.
Yeah.
Like it's just
I mean,
recorded so well.
You got to remember, there's CD burning wasn't really a thing yet. CDs were, people had CDs and stuff, but recording to burning to a CD. Yeah. There you go.
What do you got
Is
there,
that one of the
Dirk?
demos from
What
the
is that?
mixes, Dirk?
This is the Bernie Grunman Master.
Oh my gosh, dude. That's incredible.
So yeah,
Actually,
that's what we would have got to listen to, right? That's what we would have gotten tapes to listen to for the first time. Yep.
The Master is January 26, 1996.
Wow.
So
There you
the
go.
Master
That
by the end of January.
makes sense.
Yeah.
I
So you all
remember,
are floored.
Oh, dude.
Oh, yeah.
I was at the point, at the risk of belaboring, I was convinced because of was in a very weird church experience as a kid. And I had, at the end of the Crucified, I had a lot of like guilt in my head that I was battling daily about music and art and everything. And basically, the idea that I should not be doing these things, that these things are unhealthy for me. And, there was like, I had to battle this whole thing just to get in there and do it. And then to go in and sing something. I've never sung anything that anyone would describe as beautiful. That's not a thing that and for a 25-year-old idiot, that's a very uncomfortable position, And I remember Brian had mixed like 5 or 6 songs, and I'll just always remember this. I had this cassette player, right? And it was so terrible. It just, cassette, I had like a Walkman type cassette player, but this was like, cassette players are starting to kind of fall off. So they're trying to make them exotic and cool. And mine had this goofy little like bumper around it that made it look like these old toys from the 70s called cooties. I don't know if you know what those are, but it was ridiculous looking. And it was like all rubber around it. But I loved that thing because you could drop it and it wouldn't disintegrate,
I'm surprised it wasn't built into a fanny pack.
No, or some tie-dyed long johns. So I threw it on, and I
Or a
had this
bucket hat.
I had this brown leather jacket for the longest time. I remember wearing it all the time. I was on some of the speakeasy photo shoot stuff, but I remember walking around Hollywood with that cassette and listening to it as I just walked the streets, and I was weeping because I didn't believe I was ever going to be able to make music again. And then now, not only am I making music again, I'm doing it in this studio with these guys, and these are the songs. Like, really, I just didn't. It was a lot to wrap my head around. Man, that was huge for me.
So there becomes this aesthetic or visual component to your finer point about starting to appreciate art as more than just the audio. And there's a visual aesthetic. In fact, Dirk, if you could do me a favor and just open up your scrapbook real quick and show some of the conceptual ideas you had for the artwork for Friction, or some of the proposals that were made.
Great
Mark,
to see this, man.
Mark, in some of the working with you on these vinyl packages and reissues, I realized that your visual aesthetic is very unique. It's very oblique in a lot of ways. You're drawn to composition in a way that sometimes they don't have relationship to one another. So when I look at some of these pieces here, original straight razor designs, which most people don't realize looking at some of this, that there is, pill bottles, like old pharmacy pill bottles sitting behind the straight razor. And some of these ideas come to fruition. And some of them, what is the one that's in the middle on the left, Dirk? It's not got a straight razor. It's got like a ship, or what is that even? I can't even see.
It's a straight razor. It's just really dark.
Really dark. So you guys are playing with composition, and you're also playing with a bunch of seemingly unrelated compositional frameworks here. You got snakes, sitting in an ashtray or something of that nature. You've got the straight razor, the old school. You've got a very dark pill bottle sort of situation behind it. And then you've got all these more or less like these, I guess they're framed artwork and things like that. As you look, as you zoom in closer, I don't really know
Oh
how to
my
describe
God.
what we're talking about here.
So let me give you like the briefest of things. So originally, we're all sitting down, what are we going to call our record? And we came up, the original concept was that we would all pick a word, and then the album would be those 4 words. It wouldn't, so like literally I could say the album was called blah because that was my title, and someone could say the album was called blah because that was their title. You know what I mean? It was, and then there would be, the cover would be broken into 4 segments. It was all this, it was a terrible idea. But Dirk said, well, I think I'm going to use the word friction for my word. And all the other 3 of us went, oh, friction, that's a really good word. Let's just use that.
Yep.
But that's where the inside comes from. There's the picture, like the burning bedroom, we're the ones that have our names below them.
Yep.
That was kind of the inside version of that, where we all got to pick an image that meant something to us. Like Mark's is like a high concept thing that he did with someone. Mine is just a picture that a friend of mine took that I really loved.
Sure.
Dirk's is, I think Dirk's is an old, what we call, what is yours, Dirk?
It's the bridge, the cover.
Oh yeah,
bridge.
I was going to say it was a
Madison County.
Dirk barn, but
Madison County, Iowa.
and then of course Jeremy's is artsy in a really weird way because that's Jeremy.
It's super. It's just super. You look at these things; they seem to be rather unrelated. You know what
yes,
I mean?
they 100% are.
And you also look at the I guess Griffin design as probably emblematic and iconic, and it predated the official logo that you guys ended up settling on, which was the graphic interpretation of the flower, the Stavesacre flower, so
which was all that was all Jason.
It's kind of right
yeah,
there
that
in the middle of
designed
this, in the middle of the CD right there. You can see that's probably underneath the tray as you're pulling the CD out. Few people who don't or know the CD medium would understand that concept of like looking at the graphic behind the CD tray as being a,
well, that was because if you go to the lyric sheet where the song Devil is, it just has the flower, and then the flower was the footnote symbol to tell you to look under the tray to find the lyrics.
yeah
That was a lot of that was Jason, the guy that designed it. He's the one that came up with the stylized flower. I'm pretty sure he threw the Griffins in there, and we all just went, cool,
man.
No, actually, the Griffins was something that we requested, but and that snake photo was
That's
what
your
I
snake.
originally submitted. Yeah, that was my old snake, Sebastian. That was what I had originally suggested as the album cover, and you were like, dude, no, this is not. That is not the vibe we're looking to put out, but we wanted there to be a little bit of mystery involved, and then the idea of it being under the tray came up because that was, I think that was your idea, Baloo, because of all a million CDs passed through your hands while you were at Tower Records,
Yeah.
That's very true.
It's so funny to look at those images, man, especially the one in my room. I mean, that's like early days of Photoshop. But Jeremy Jason Pickersgill designed the logo, like the emblem that we use, the flower, because we told him we didn't want anything that had any spiritual significance. We just wanted it to mean Stavesacre. And he came up with that because he was a Star Wars nerd, and that was originally the inspiration was that old Empire insignia. But then he did his own thing because back then, that was unheard of, that somebody could sit in front of a computer screen and move shapes around and sort of block something out and create something. But I feel like all the suggestions of ideas came from us, but the composition, I can't take any credit for any of those album cover options. That's all Pickersgill, because he was. Don't you guys remember when we went to his house? He was like this is in the early days of the internet, and he was on some chat room with Danny Elfman, and they would always send each other weird images. I remember being at his house,
Yep.
like, no, this is no way.
That's not
Yep.
the Danny Elfman. He's like, oh no, it's Danny.
Yeah, that's
I
funny.
wonder where he is now, Pickersgill. What's he doing now?
We looked at this artwork and we saw a couple things that we really loved and wanted to hone in on. So for instance,
Okay.
taking that straight razor graphic and really trying to show some of the other
Yeah.
visuals that are
It's
totally
beautiful.
missing from
Yeah.
the original CD. So that there was an old school razor on the left and that there's these pill bottles here, and recreating all of the typefaces and fonts from scratch, redrawing them all, and really just sort of honing in on like things that you didn't notice originally when you saw this. We thought would be really fun. We also felt like maybe some of these straight razor boxes were a little bit competing with the track listings on the back in some ways. So we decided to take the pill box and remove it to put your snake eating the mouse in the back.
Mhm.
And it almost like in my mind was this kind of funny juxtaposition of like essentially a predator who has like a boy band poster in the predator's nest, and the boy band poster is you guys specifically.
That is
So-
an ugly ass boy band.
Yep, you're absolutely right.
Fail.
That's a-
You know, your recovery of the photo of the album cover, I'm sure that I noticed it then, or I'd like to think that I did, but I honestly don't even remember the little is that an applique? What is that right at the beneath the razor? The
Yeah.
embroidery on the
Embroidery on the
not-
napkin. Yeah.
I never would have thought of that being there. So it looks
Yep.
great. It really does look great, you guys.
I think it's fun.
Photos, right? Jason
What's that?
did all of it. Jason like staged the photos. He did all of that in his apartment in Orange.
Yeah.
Like we were visiting a circle and going upstairs, and he had
Yeah.
all that stuff like sitting there.
Well, I think he was just lucky because where he lived in Orange was right above one of like the most amazing old school antique stores in Orange. So he was literally probably able to walk downstairs and find a couple of straight razors and those bottles to create the little tableau to kind of make it look like you were looking at, what a guy would have had laid out to shave back in, the 40s or something like that. But yeah, he was a true artist when it came to the visuals, man. When working with him the 2 times we did, it was a blast and a half, that's for sure.
Which other did you work with him on?
He did Absolutes as well.
Okay.
Mhm.
The continuity between all the other albums he was doing at the time, like the line through Stavesacre that Friction sits on looks a lot like Parachain Mercury, all of the other things he was doing at the same time, like all had a similar feel, but he made them so unique.
Yeah.
Right.
What else do you have in your little scrapbook of fun that relates to the promotion of this album or the marketing of this album? What the fans want to see all those goodies.
You got to have that poster, Dirk. Do you have the big poster? Oh yeah, that's from that photo shoot.
Okay, so that's the original promo release before the album
Yeah.
packaged in jewel case.
I'm in this weird plastic bag for some reason instead of a paper sleeve.
Yeah.
I have the promo photo, this little like shelf card guy,
Oh yeah, I remember those.
in-store marketing blue. What are they called? There's probably a name for it.
Shelf talker.
There you go. I mean, I have the Diamante pitch sheet.
What is that? What does that mean?
Their sales sheet, like when Tooth and Nail would go into their meetings with Diamante, like all the marketing points. I've got the pastoral reference letter that my dad wrote for us.
Tell me about that. You're getting extolled.
I have a copy of that, by the way.
This
Do you
is-
really?
When you
That's
guys played my
awesome.
church,
That's incredible.
You needed all that stuff, right?
Oh yeah.
To get your record. I mean, let's be honest, the lyrics to Devil are hidden. You had to print all the lyrics, but that was the one that was kind of dicey. And so that's why it's under the tray. And
Right.
that's why we created that whole scavenger hunt, was because we were kind of worried about how that was going to be taken.
Right. Well, and then for fun, we did on the second album, we hid all the lyrics under the tray just to be complete dicks.
Right. Because you had to have them, but we were going to hide them.
Correct.
Yeah, there's the Stavesacre friction key selling points.
Well, and then as someone who worked in the record industry, so Tooth and Nail will take that to Diamante and say, this is how you sell this record. And then the reps then use that to sell it to the stores.
Sure.
They're the ones who say, oh, you know, this record's great because they blah, blah, blah. Oh my God, look at all that.
Whoa.
I can't figure out-
Magazines.
That's weird, man.
Yeah.
That's very
So,
weird.
so you're marketed at the time because there's always the Christian adjacency that
Mhm.
if the band is popping at that moment in 96, 95, we're going to liken it to, hey, if you're into these three Christian bands, Mortal, whoever they might have called you guys at that time. But then there was also
Recommended if you like.
recommended if you like. So who in your mind did you feel the most frustrated that you were being compared to, especially
God,
on those
dude.
posters? Who did you
I
not want to
remember
be?
posters, but let me just tell you something. Somewhere along the way, some rat bastard wrote a bio for us that somehow is everywhere. I mean, everywhere. Before we get there, it was there. It was at allmusic.com. It was on, I think it was on Spotify. It was on Apple Music. It was everywhere originally. It was like, and
Is it the
three
one that
bands
starts
they-
with CCM Supergroup?
Yeah, and like,
God bless America.
and the bands that we sounded like were White. The heck were they called?
White Heart? White Lion? White Lion?
White Zombie?
It was a really random metal band, like a
Yeah.
rock. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's White Lion
Maybe. And then
because I have their
Happy.
record.
Die Happy.
Yeah, Die Happy. And then there was one other band that was just like completely random. Like, what? Where did you get this from? And it was everywhere. And no matter what you did, you could not get it
Yeah.
changed. They wouldn't change it.
Okay.
So
It's
that was our.
Go to Wikipedia right now. It's in there.
Yeah, we've tried to edit
Incredible.
it, and someone else puts it back in there.
This is the White Lion band.
I think the term that we got saddled with at the beginning, luckily it faded fast, but at the beginning being called that super group because we came from other bands was like, it was just damning. It was like, you know, that was something we tried to get rid of real quick. And I think we did a pretty good job of getting rid of it, stood on our own. But shoot, we got Crucified yelled at us and Crucified songs yelled at us for at least the first couple tours.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I also
Oh man, I thought for sure you guys would play at least Mindbender or something like that. Like, you know, like why
It's
would
like,
you
dude,
think that?
But the thing is like, you don't want to hear this band play Mindbender. Trust me.
It's
I can't
not
play
the
that.
same.
I can't play that guitar like Greg.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm a good guitar player and I can do a lot of stuff Greg can, but I can't play that the way Greg can, man. That's Greg.
I think
I don't know what to tell you.
I think for a lot of folks in Tim and I's generation, coming up in the 90s as teenagers and discovering this type of music through Diamante demo cassettes and listen stations around the bookstores, either regular record stores or Christian bookstores. You know, sometimes in my case, discovering you guys as being a shirt on Mike Herrera on the Life in General insert was like a marketing call. Like anything Mike Herrera wore, I wanted to find out what that was about, especially if it was a band shirt or something like that. So
That
my
was a
first
very
big-
nice thing of him to do.
it's a big moment.
Yes.
And then, yeah, my first show was MXPX 90 Pound Listen Value Pack in 96. And very quickly after
That's
that, seeing
awesome.
you with MXPX at the Bluebird on
Yeah.
that tour. So
that was such a fun tour,
and
man.
Puller too, you know, and to be going to a show that you expected it to sound like Epitaph skate punk and then be confronted with Stavesacre and Puller was just tremendously a gift for somebody who was just discovering any type of music. It was a really nice bill to have you guys put on that. And then they put you on with like insiders later, and it made no sense at all. So I would have preferred you guys stayed in the alternative whatever lane, but we realized very quickly that that's not how the world worked, especially in the Christian music scene. It was just like package whatever, see what
Yeah.
sticks. Who knows?
Well, I mean, we had that huge tour we did later on that was like us, Supertones headlining, us in the middle, and Goaty Hook opening. I mean, that is just,
Yeah.
that tour doesn't exist outside of the Christian market.
No.
That mix of music, that's just doesn't work.
No.
You know.
I definitely walked from the Ozatlan Theater to the 7-Eleven on what is that? It's not Santa Fe, but you know, I walked with Christian to the 7-Eleven during that tour. That's a good memory I have of that show specifically.
I remember that as that's in Denver, right?
Ozatlan Theater, yeah.
I shocked the shit out of myself in that theater because there was water leaking on the stage and my lip touched the microphone.
Right.
Just rode the lightning through my body. It was incredible. You ain't been shocked until you get your lip zapped, man. That's something different.
Well, I think here's a good place for us to pause, because I don't want to put a situation where we're asking people to watch 2.5 hours worth of a YouTube video. So getting into absolutes or the next chapter could be a to be continued situation. So for those of you who stuck with us through this whole conversation about the earliest days of Stavesacre and Friction, we thank you. We're going to do this again soon. In fact, you'll probably be able to watch them back to back. Who knows?